Hey everybody, Rob here, and finally the day has come. We've learned a lot more about what the new SAT is going to look like. So, first things first, let's get this right out of the way. If you are currently a sophomore or a junior, in other words, if you're taking the SAT this year, or if you're planning on taking the SAT for the first time next year, this will not affect you at all. So all the old stuff about the SAT, all the videos on my site, all the content you can find out there, for SAT prep is all good for you. If you are currently a freshman, in other words, if you're planning on taking your first SAT in the spring of 2016, or in other words, if you're not in the American system, if you're planning on taking your first real SAT in 2 years, the spring of 2016, then this redesign will most likely affect you, though you will have some flexibility in when you take your SAT. In theory, if you're currently a freshman, you can take the old SAT in the fall of 2015 and still be able to use all these resources. But if you are in middle school, if you're in 8th grade or 7th grade or below, and you're somehow watching this video, then the new SAT will affect you. So first things first, I have a few overall comments. I haven't seen any questions yet. They haven't released any. So a lot of this, what I'm going to say, is based on my own opinions about what I've seen so far in the materials they've released. And one other comment. So one of the things that they're harping on a lot, and I think it's important, is they are talking about how they're trying to take expensive test prep out of the game. I think that's critical. One of my biggest critiques of the industry that I'm a part of is that it does indeed prey upon the insecurities of students and the insecurities of parents, especially parents, where you feel like, oh, if I don't spend $2,000 on this course, if I don't spend $5,000 on private one-on-one tutoring, I'm not going to be able to do well, right? That's what a lot of students, a lot of parents feel. That's one of the reasons why I started this site and started this YouTube channel, to first provide free material, but then also to provide a course, a program for relatively low cost, right? $97 at this point, very cheap. Try to pay my bills because I got to pay my bills, to give the best prep that I could, right? And that's kind of what my goal is. If I can give it for free, if I had some millionaire benefactor like Bill Gates to give me $1 million to cover all my bills and blah, 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 or whatever, how much it would be, right? I would release this all for free. But I think that is very important. So I'm going to take a stand, and I think a lot of our industry is kind of messed up, and I think it is good that they're trying to equalize that a bit. However, the irony is they finally have admitted what everyone in the industry has been saying forever, which is that prep works, right? That prep, at least on the old SAT, is effective, right? They're arguing, oh, well, it shouldn't be about how much money you can spend, and therefore proving the point that it is about, how much you invest in your prep in terms of time and effort. So I think there's a weird ambiguity there. After all these years of saying prep doesn't matter, now suddenly it's prep matters, or at least I don't know. Who knows what they're saying? But anyway, that's just a general opening remark. Let's look at some of the changes that they're making from the old SAT to the new SAT, and I'll just give you my first comments about what I think about it and so on. So the first thing that they're doing, let's actually go over the basics first. So again, it's coming out in the spring of 2016. There'll be a computer version in some locations, which I'm not a huge fan of computer tests. I like being able to write on a piece of paper. When you're looking at a screen, you can't write on the screen. You can't cross out choices. All of our techniques about process elimination just don't work on a computer. Not a huge fan of computers. I think that's where it's going. Eventually, I think it will all be computer tests. That's where the ACT is probably going, what the SAT is going, for better or for worse. There's 3 sections: the evidence-based reading and writing. So they're basically combining reading and writing together into one section. Then you got the math, and then the essay, which is going to be optional. But you know what? For most students who are looking to get into a good college, the essay will most likely not be optional, right? I mean, probably almost, not almost every, but a huge chunk of the colleges out there are going to require the essay. So calling it an optional essay is a little bit silly because it's going to be more or less required. Length of the SAT is about 3 hours, so with 50 minutes for the essay, so it's about how long it is now. Maybe the actual multiple choice it is going to be a little bit shorter, but it's basically as long as it is now. So for better or for worse. It's going back to a 400 to 1600 point scale. I'm kind of curious to see how they're going to do this because the curves I think are going to be really compressed because they're going to have to put in a bunch of questions into a not very wide curve. We'll see how it turns out, so that'll be interesting to see. So let's get into some of the key changes. So first, reading and writing sections, according to them, do not require students to cite evidence in the current SAT. Students select answers to demonstrate their understanding of text, but are not asked to support their answers. In the new SAT, you're going to have to support your answers with evidence, including questions that require you to cite a specific part of the passage to support your answer choice. Here's the thing. I've always preached from the beginning for the reading section. The way you know your answer is right is if you could point to something in the passage that supports it, right? This is nothing new, right? Maybe there'll be questions now where you have to actually pick a line, but for any of you out there who have kind of watched my reading videos and you might be doing the new SAT, don't be afraid about this. This is what I've preached from the beginning. The idea, I think this is a little bit of sleight of hand on their part. Sure, you're not formally asked to pick out a line in the old SAT, but that's what it's about. I mean, you're picking answers based on evidence in the text, right? Whether it's reading, sentence completions, even grammar, right? So I think that'll be a change, sort of, but I don't think it'll be as big as it's being laid out here in some ways, especially for the reading. Source documents do not represent a wide range of disciplines on the old SAT. While many different types of text may appear, there's no requirement. So yeah, it's true. With the ACT, there's your science, your humanities, your literature, and your social science. I forget the other, but anyway, you've got 4 that you're always going to see. Whereas on the SAT, it's a mix. But the fact of the matter is, you're often going to see science on the SAT. You're often going to see history. You're going to see politics. You're going to see whatever. So the only difference here is that they're going to have one science passage, one history passage, one of this, one of that, right? So you'll know more about what's appearing, which I suppose is good. But in the end, you're still going to be tackling these texts. The one thing that's kind of funny is they're saying on every SAT, students will encounter source texts from science, history, and social studies, analyzing them the way they would in those classes. Here's the problem. It's the problem with the reading section from the beginning. You guys aren't really taught how to analyze sources and how to read these texts closely. That's why the reading section is so difficult for many of you, and that's what I'm trying to reverse. So this idea that this is kind of new is kind of dumb, because there have always been these kind of passages, and people have still struggled with them because you guys are not taught in many ways how to read these. So again, if you follow my reading videos, I cover all this in detail there to help you with that. A very big change and kind of interesting. I'll be curious to see where they go with this. So basically, long story short, in this third one, they're not going to be using really, really fancy, obscure vocab anymore. They're going to use words like synthesis and empirical, whose specific meaning depends on the context. First things first. Empirical, to me, I don't know how much you can bend that meaning. I mean, empirical is empirical, right? It's based on what you would see or observe in the world, evidence you see or observe in the world, right? So I'm not sure how that word changes based on context, but give them the benefit of the doubt. This is very different. So we'll be going more about a limited pool of words and the secondary and tertiary definitions there. Is that easier? I don't think so. In some ways, it's harder because, so sure, no one likes, and I hate drilling hundreds and thousands of words for the old SAT. I think it's a waste of time. I talk about this all the time in my videos. Whereas the synthesis, the new way they're doing this, okay, you can't drill words, but it's even harder because if you don't read a lot, if you're not exposed to these words in different contexts, forget about it. How would you know how to prepare for this? So, I mean, we'll see how it goes. I think that's actually going to be harder in some ways than the old. I think some people might regret not having those stacks of cards to study, but we'll see how it goes. I think on the whole, it's probably a positive change, though. The essay is a huge change. Basically, the old SAT essays I've talked about before is a joke. You can make up information. It's crap, so I'm very happy that they're changing it. And basically, it sounds like they're going to make it much more rigorous. You're going to have something to read, you're going to have evidence you're going to need to cite, and you're going to have to write something actually relevant. So I think that's a great change. It'll be harder, that's for sure. It's 50 minutes. I mean, that tells you right there, 50 minutes of writing compared to 25. So that's a good change, but that will be harder, I guarantee it. The math is actually changing pretty significantly. They claim that the math section on the old test samples content from a wide range of high school level math. Sort of, kind of, but not really. I mean, Algebra 1, sure, a piece of Algebra 2, barely any geometry, and then middle school math. That is not a wide range to me. As I've always said with the SAT math, it's not about content. It's about how you apply concepts to problem-solving situations. So I don't know what they're really going on about here. The change, though, is pretty significant. They're narrowing down the math to 3 fields, 3 major topics, which they call problem solving and data analysis. To me, that's like charts and graphs with percentages, ratios, proportions. So basically knowing how to work with numbers in a proportional way, which I think is interesting. The heart of algebra, so that's like linear equations, lines, things like that, systems equations, and passport to advanced math. That to me seems like it's going to be quadratics, functions. So on the surface, it looks like a lot of geometry might be going away. Some of the older middle school stuff like remainders and factors, that might be going away. So we'll see how the change goes here, but this is going to be pretty interesting. I think they're going to have, if they're going to narrow it, they're going to have to make the questions harder in terms of problem solving. I still think you're going to see the same style of questions. I don't know. We'll see. Clearly, though, it doesn't look like there's any trigonometry, which is I thought was where they would be going to match the ACT. But right now, we don't see any trig. So this is interesting. We'll see where this goes. I think it's going to be the same style type questions. So it's going to be more about applying concepts rather than repeating what you do in math class. So let's go back to our table here. Calculator, okay, long story short, you can use the calculator in the entire math section on the old SAT. On the new, there's going to be some no calculator sections. And I think that's kind of a good idea because you shouldn't have to rely just on your calculator. Having that numerical fluency is really important. I think a lot of students will really struggle with this, though. I mean, how many of you out there are completely attached to your calculator from day one? So if you're a freshman or below and this is you, right, you can't do anything without a calculator, this might be a warning, a sign that you're going to have to change some things. Reading and writing does not require data analysis. The reading and writing section does not often include passages for science and social studies with graphs and tables. Long story short, the old SAT in the reading and writing never had graphs and tables. In the new, they're going to have graphs and tables. So imagine kind of a mixture of the ACT science where you've got like passages, but tables as well. Maybe even for history, we'll see like changes over time, like a graph or a chart with a thing. So basically, it's going to be passages, but there's going to be more data analysis, which is definitely new. I think relatively interesting. I think this is a good change. We should be focusing more on interpreting information and analyzing data in addition to reading a text. So again, we'll see what they do with this. Source documents drawn from text, not widely recognized. Okay, whatever. On the old SAT, you'll never see anything you'd recognize. Whereas in the new one, they're going to draw documents from the founding documents or the Great Global Conversation. So in other words, like Declaration of Independence, Constitution, Gettysburg Address, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Kind of weird, especially for non-Americans, for international students. Will you be at a disadvantage here? Maybe. I mean, I don't know. We'll see how this plays out. It's kind of weird. I see the point of it. It is important if you're an American to understand, the Constitution, founding documents. It's important just for your civic knowledge. But it's kind of weird for the SAT. A really good change, which bravo, the -1/4 point penalty on incorrect answers will be eliminated for the new SAT. Fantastic. Finally. Don't have to worry about guessing. On the new SAT, just put your best answer. Should have been that way a while ago. Next one, essay is required. Essay is optional. I already talked about this. For the most part, for most of you, it's de facto required anyway. Most schools are going to want to see it. I would probably say, who knows, but probably a majority of schools are going to want to see this. So I don't think that's really anything to celebrate. Scale score is going from 2,400 to 1,600 with a separate score for the essay, kind of like the ACT. Again, it'll be interesting to see how they're going to cram 3 hours of test into a 1,600 scale. I guess they did it with the old test, the old SAT before the new one. But anyway, and then again, SAT is available on paper only versus now it'll be digital. I would say take it paper as long as you can because otherwise it's annoying. And that's pretty much it. So I think there's some good changes here. I'm pretty happy about some of the changes. I think there's some questionable choices. But again, I haven't seen questions, so we have to really see what questions look like. The point is, regardless of what happens, I'm going to be following this 100%. Anytime they release new questions, I'm going to present them for you. I'm going to make a whole section of my site dedicated to the new SAT because eventually I'm going to have to transition to the new SAT. But it will be a pretty significant change. Honestly, I'm actually kind of encouraged. I thought they were going to make an ACT light. I mean, we'll see. Maybe this will look a lot more like the ACT than I would have liked. But it looks like they're going in a different direction, so I'm happy about that. Again, it really is going to come down to what this test looks like. But if it's going where it's going, I'm not actually super depressed about it. It's not terrible. Hooray. But again, we'll see more. We'll hopefully get more information soon, and then we'll go from there. But anyway, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll leave links to all these little doodads in the description. And any questions or comments, just leave a comment below. Have a conversation about it. But again, just to reiterate, if you are currently a sophomore or a junior or if you're taking your SAT in the next 2 years, your first SAT in the next 2 years, you're fine. If your first SAT will be taken by spring 2016, you may be affected. If your first SAT is beyond that, then you will certainly be affected by this change. Okay, so that's it for this video, and I'll talk to you later.